1,000 years old, and she cannot die.
Highlander fans, give me a cheer! I'm sure we've left no stone unturned to go deeper into the franchise lore, and stumbling upon yet another spin-off, Highlander the Raven, was only natural. This show branched from the stories of Duncan MacLeod in Highlander the series, and revolved around Amanda. You remember Amanda, right? Yeah, she was the immortal thief Duncan came across in Florence in 1635, which marked the beginning of their long but sporadic relationship. Now, the two went on many adventures, and Amanda played a major role in Duncan's life, even romantically. She was featured heavily in Highlander the series finale, where Duncan professed his love for her, saying,
"You make my heart glad. You always have."
And many fans wanted to see more of her, opening the door for the sister show Highlander the Raven. However, Amanda's show didn't really land well, and all we got was one season of this crazy woman doing some of her antics. So, what happened? I mean, Amanda was a loved character, but when her own series premiered, why did it fail to make a mark? Let's find out.
She is immortal.
Personally, I was a pretty big fan of Amanda. I'm not sure if you can exactly call her a good person, but she sure was as chaotic as anyone could get. She always thrived in the gray zone, sometimes choosing a life of crime, while at others heeding Duncan's advice and trying to be genuinely helpful. Yet one thing always remained constant: their love for each other. And by Season 3's finale, I was pretty much convinced that she should become a season regular. Yes, she was absolutely rogue and unhinged, but that made her the perfect person to complement Duncan's noble persona, which had streaks of wildness, you know. Let me give you an example. In Highlander the series Season 3 finale, Amanda held herself quite well against Callus, and Elizabeth really brought out the character's essence with the confrontation and sword work. Also, if you remember, she also made an exit plan when she was disarmed, which once again proved how clever and calculating she was. By the time Highlander the Raven started appearing on television in 1998, we were extremely familiar with what this woman was capable of doing. Amanda was a top-notch manipulator and could be extremely deceiving to friend and foe alike. She was also very compelling and sly, having lived on for centuries without thinking about the chaos left in the wake of her actions. Still, she was not malicious in the strictest sense of the term. She had criminal tendencies and often stole from museums, banks, or unbelievably rich people. However, despite her mischievous nature, she refrained from robbing genuinely good-natured people. With Highlander the Raven, director Dennis Barry, however, wanted to underplay her already established fierceness. That was the first wrong decision. Next would be not having Duncan back. Yes, as I said, Amanda came to exist in the Highlander world because of Duncan, and because of all their time together. But the showrunners couldn't get him for even one episode. That bugged us a lot, and on top of that, they decided to not bring back any of the original faces from the main series. Not even Mythos, dude! Yes, Dawson did appear a couple of times, but it wasn't enough to repair the damage that had already been done. I mean, by the time he came in, we more or less lost interest in the show. But that's weird, right? Because the producers clearly wanted to cash in on the IP, but made such a bleak spin-off to do so. Now here's where things get interesting. The original plan for what eventually became Highlander the Raven was actually very different. Instead of jumping straight into a full-blown spin-off, the creators first experimented during the 6th and final season of Highlander the series. Basically to test the waters. They introduced a set of episodes centered around different female immortals, almost like a soft audition process. However, the producers were completely set on having a female-led spin-off, even though a lot of fans were hoping for something else entirely, a Mythos and Dawson spin-off. And honestly, that could have been incredible, but the makers had their own vision. So they rolled out 5 potential candidates, each with their own history and personality, and the logic was straightforward: whichever character connected the most with fans would go on to lead the new show. The lineup was actually pretty interesting. We had Regan Cole, a 500-year-old immortal, Katya, who lived for 700 years, Alex Raven, who was around 1,900 years old, then Catherine at 2,300 years, and finally Kira, the oldest of them all, at about 2,400 years. On paper, this sounded like a solid plan, right? A wide range of characters from different eras, each bringing something unique to the table. But that's not how things played out. None of these new characters really clicked with the audience. They just did not leave a strong impression, and that put the creators in a difficult position. So in the end, they decided to play it safe and went back to someone fans already knew and loved, Amanda. Yes, she was brought in as a failsafe, and I guess it explains the lack of effort given into her character development. There's also this idea among many that Amanda only got the spin-off because they couldn't lock in another lead, but honestly, there's no real evidence for that. Elizabeth Grayson has, however, stated in the Highlander Rewatched podcast, I've always said this to everyone that it's, the luckiest opportunity for me, and it's the best acting job I've ever had, and Raven, same thing. Before I get any further into how the show did not achieve the success they hoped for, let me tell you the basic premise. Right from the beginning, the show threw Amanda into a situation where her usual carefree lifestyle finally caught up with her. In the premiere episode, Reborn, Amanda was being hunted by the police for a murder she did not commit, and the first episode was ready to set up her big change when a detective, Claudia Hoffman, took a bullet for her without knowing about her immortality. Now, this was a huge moment and should have been the turning point where Amanda realized that her actions had real consequences. Now, Claudia was not alone in the pursuit of Amanda. Her partner, Nick Wolf, was there, but by the end of the episode, they realized that Amanda was not the killer they were looking for, and thus the entire sacrifice of Claudia. Still, Amanda got shot by the real perpetrator, but Nick managed to put him down. He, however, was shaken by the loss of his partner, but what was even more surprising was seeing Amanda come back to life. At first, he believed that she was a ghost and even told her so in the second episode. However, their lives got entangled when an old immortal enemy of Amanda, Maria Cardoza, came back and was now on the radar of Wolf for being a wanted criminal. In short, they both wanted him dead. Amanda finally spilled the truth about her and Cardoza being immortals in the episode. Full disclosure, and boy, Nick's face after seeing her come back from the dead again was hilarious. She went after Cardoza, beheaded him, and explained to the mere mortal what a quickening was. Now this was the moment the show locked in its premise. A grounded cop getting dragged into the madness of immortals. And it actually worked for a while. I know, many find the first half terrible because of how far it felt from the Highlander vibe, but honestly, I enjoyed Amanda's quips and one-liners like, "It's not like we are listed in yellow pages," referring to immortals. Anyway, soon the second part of the series started drawing from Amanda's past, and honestly, this is where you get confused. Like, what is the point of the show? To portray Amanda killing her centuries-old enemies, or living a new life with a clear budding relationship with Nick? And all while she kept on oscillating between personalities. One moment, like in episode 8 titled The Unknown Soldier, Amanda crossed paths with immortal John Ray Fielding, played by Michael Rhodes, in a quiet graveyard, and suddenly her past came crashing back. She remembered stealing a pouch of jewels from him way back in 1917, not knowing what was inside. That pouch held a withdrawal order that never reached its destination, and because of it, 120 soldiers died. The weight of that realization hit her hard, and for the first time, she offered her own head to make it right. But thanks to a well-timed word from Wolf, Fielding saw her remorse and let her live. However, in the next episode, she was breaking into houses. So yeah, none of the episodes really make sense, and Amanda's character evolution too just became complicated. Oh, and in the meantime, Amanda fought some of the really powerful female immortals because even after the producers stuck to one lead structure, they still wanted to put in some more badass women. Honestly, none of them really sparked the sense of hatred you want to see and root for Amanda to take their head. For instance, in A Matter of Time, an immortal Amanda had to duel with Krista, who was sent by one of her bigger foes, Corda. The duel looked lackadaisical at best, and Amanda using Chinese fighting fans, which she stole from Corda to defeat Krista, didn't really work. It just felt out of place. The series, however, kept Nick and her at the center, leaning towards a more romantic idea, but by the end, when she shot an already wounded Nick to trigger his immortality, Nick came back. However, instead of bringing them closer, the incident completely broke them because she had never told him the truth and never gave him a choice. And that moment changed everything between them, ending the series on a cliffhanger. Maybe another season would have helped, but there was no second season. And the reasons are pretty valid. The first half of the season leans hard on generic cop show tropes and sadly milks them to exhaustion. And in the midst of some painful beheadings, the characters stumbled through boring personality arcs better suited for the 80s moonlighting style knockoff than a Highlander series. Also, there wasn't enough beheading for it to be a Highlander spinoff. There, I said it. In the latter half, relocating the action to Paris did add atmosphere, and the cast appeared somewhat balanced, and just when you think it's starting to feel like Highlander continuity, you'd realize that no story arc or character were really developed. By the end of the final episode, Nick's immortality twist just contradicted earlier setups even more. Moreover, the weak chemistry between Amanda and Nick was also a pushing factor for Highlander the Raven not to be renewed. Grayson was already very candid about it on a commentary track. She said she did not feel the chemistry with Johansson or his character. They were cautious of each other and very competitive about being the star. The producers even considered calling it The Raven and the Wolf. Of course, the ratings sagged and the shifting landscape of syndicated TV made matters worse. And here's an interesting part about the moonlighting aura. Basically, associate producer Don Palnesa, who also edited the episode, said he loved how the story started out as Moonlighting meets Highlander, but he wished it hadn't drifted darker and ended up feeling like a rehash of the old series. According to him, there was a clash behind the scenes where executive producer Marla Ginsburg wanted to take it in a fresh direction, while Bill Panzer, producer of pretty much everything Highlander, including the movies, insisted on sticking to the traditional Highlander vibe, and in the end, Panzer won. Coming to Amanda and Nick's on-screen personality, Grayson has been frank about how difficult it was, and that her sudden change into being a goody two-shoes probably didn't appeal to the fans of Amanda. To quote Grayson, "To make the adjustment from sort of this wild, irresponsible female being the hero of the show, I think it maybe took away a lot of Amanda's fun to make her a bit more responsible, but you had to do it. I mean, you can't have someone who's stealing and being really irresponsible and very manipulative, and then you can't have her taking someone's head at the end of the episode. People just won't go there. It just took so long for it to find what it was supposed to be, and maybe it never found it. And I cannot agree more. Highlander Raven was confused from the very beginning. Firstly, the very appearance. I know they were going for a normal TV intro, but they still had enough cool shows to work with. But I'll never get why they decided to switch to slow-mo at the end of each act. And this confusion spread through the entire show. There's no one episode that truly stands out, and nothing makes you want to go back and stay. Even moments that should have added excitement, like Charlotte Lewis showing up as another immortal thief and Amanda's rival in episode 16, titled The Frame, gave the show a brief spark before it slipped back into being forgettable. As far as styling goes, Elizabeth Grayson did rock a bleached, pixie-ish haircut that honestly made her look like a bald eagle in flight. But it was never about how hot she looked. Well, maybe a little about it, but hey, the appearance could have worked better only if the writing actually gave some depth to her. You know, something meaningful to dig into. For instance, her dynamic with her bookkeeper Lucy, who was sometimes Amanda's partner in crime and sometimes a motherly figure, didn't capture us either. You get the drift, right? There wasn't one solid plot point or relationship to hook viewers. Instead, she was stuck bouncing through almost sitcom-like situations, like when she went out on an apparent date with the immortal thief Victor Hansen in the episode The Devil You Know. He wanted her help to steal the Valentino diamond, but honestly, Amanda's flirtatious attitude with Victor felt a little forced, and just took away the essence of the show even more. However, suddenly the creator wanted to burden her with guilt of her past. I mean, pick a side, dude. Of course, when they tried to push this idea, it fell flat because Amanda had lived this way for so long that forcing that emotional turn now felt off, making things feel unnecessarily heavy and convoluted. Nick Wolf, on the other hand, got the shorter end of the stick. Even his name sounds like something straight out of a cliched detective fantasy. Most of the time, you just see him there, just present and reacting to Amanda and whatever mayhem surrounds her. Johansson did try to make it work though, not gonna lie. Still, there's only so much you can do when the character isn't given much to stand on. And once you realize that the different people in the production wanted different things, it becomes pretty clear why the show went in multiple directions without a proper end, and why the character went through so many changes during development. I am so glad Johansson got One Tree Hill after that to redeem himself, because I genuinely love how well fleshed out Dan Scott was. Anyway, from the beginning, the response to the show was all over the place, and the way it was distributed definitely didn't help. Like a lot of syndicated series, it suffered from inconsistent scheduling. Some stations aired it at odd hours, others barely aired it at all, making it hard for audiences to even keep up with it. As it went on, producers too lost faith, and right in the middle of filming the Paris episodes, the French side of the production suddenly lost funding. Unfortunately, the team then had to pivot and rethink the direction of the remaining episodes. Now, as if the show didn't already have enough going against it, there was also some off-screen drama in the mix. Many believe that Grayson was dealing with some pretty serious personal issues around that time, especially with all the media frenzy during the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal and her past claims involving Bill Clinton. Rumors were also floating around that Elizabeth Grayson was involved with a deeply unstable manager who was influencing her and feeding her all kinds of extreme ideas, like Ken Starr being after her, and that her role in Highlander the Raven being some kind of mob payoff. Now, none of this was ever backed by anything solid, but the Clinton thing and these gossips definitely added to the sense that things weren't exactly smooth behind the scenes. All that being said, there were a couple of standout episodes. Take War and Peace, for example. Here we got to know why exactly Liam Riley, a mortal priest and friend of Amanda, chose the path of faith. It dug into his past and showed why he became a priest, and I really liked getting to know more about him. It's a shame we never got to see him again after that episode. So yeah, there were some fun bits in the series, and it did lean into the Highlander-esque tension towards the end, but it was too little, too late. At the end of the day, Highlander the Raven thrived on pretty mediocre and unrealistic stories. The acting performances were not always convincing either, and the dialogues like,
"Did I accidentally acquire something of yours or kick your dog or something?"
when Stefan Collier threatened to behead her, ruined the series even more. See, I always had a soft spot for Amanda because she was one of my favorite childhood heroines, and yes, that's probably why I would still appreciate some parts of the series popping up on my socials. Still, I can't help but admit that the show reminds you just how much better the main show was when it came to telling stories about immortals. To answer the question with which we began, what went wrong with Highlander the Raven? Well, pretty much everything. The script, poor jokes, the attempt to replace Amanda's chemistry with Duncan with a forced dynamic with Nick, and last but not the least, the genius idea to make a Highlander show without enough Highlander content. My honest recommendation? Watch it if you like some brain rot content after a long day, or if you have really run out of anything else to remind you about the glory of the immortal world. Alright guys, that's all for today. It honestly sucks that Highlander the Raven kinda tanked, because parts of the second half actually showed that it had real potential, but it never got a second chance to build on those moments, and now it just sits there as a bit of a low point in the Highlander franchise. Do let us know your thoughts about the show in the comments below, and if you liked this video, don't forget to give it a like and share with your friends. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!